With a fortune estimated at over $1 billion, Sean P. Diddy Combs is considered one of the most successful music moguls of all time. At just 24 years old, he founded Bad Boy Records and is credited with the discovery of some of music's biggest artists, including Usher, Mary J. Blige, and the notorious B.I.G. Through this success, he founded several other companies, the clothing line Sean John, and a television network. But his fame was not without its controversy. This controversy came to light in 2023 when Combs was slapped with a lawsuit by his former girlfriend, Cassandra Cassie Ventura. In the following days, 3 more lawsuits followed, and then recently another lawsuit that pointed to a dark, sinister sexual underworld coming to light. Welcome to Exposed, the scandalous files of the elite, Sean P. Diddy Combs. Hey, before we get into this episode, as we say with every episode, this is one person's account and it was filed in actual court documents. This particular case has been settled, but we are covering, in this case, what Cassie is saying about Diddy. We have no direct knowledge of this. So now that we've got that legalese out of the way, let's get started. All right, y'all, welcome back to Exposed Scandalous Files of the Elite. And today it's all about Sean P. Diddy Combs. And look, y'all, Sean Combs has had several different names. Diddy, P. Diddy. I knew him as Puff Daddy back in the day, but we're going to refer to him as Diddy on this episode. Now, in November of 2023, the case we're going to discuss today was filed by his longtime former girlfriend, Cassandra Ventura. She was also known as Cassie. And interestingly enough, just a few days after this lawsuit, 2 more lawsuits were filed from other parties. So we're going to cover the Cassie case today, and if we have enough time, we're going to cover another one that dropped shortly thereafter that is absolutely crazy, y'all. And then on our next episode, we're going to cover the most recent allegation, which actually came out just a couple of weeks before this recording. And it is definitely the most damning from the former producer of Bad Boy Records. So let's get into it. Now, Cassie met Diddy in late 2005 or early 2006 after Diddy heard Cassie's first single playing at a club, and he expressed interest in signing her to his label, which was Bad Boy Records. Now, at that time, Cassie was 19 years old and Diddy was 37. So within just a few months, in February of 2006, Cassie signs a 10-album deal with Diddy's record label. Cassie's first single, which was titled Cassie, was released in August of 2006, and it debuted at like number 4 on the U.S. Billboard 200. Now, obviously, that's because you've got a machine behind you. You've got Bad Boy Records behind you, and they're doing some heavy promotion, and they have a reputation for putting out hits. So to promote the album, Cassie makes television appearances, and one of those is on MTV's what's known as TRL, Total Request Live. And Cassie, what a lot of people didn't know is she suffered from some pretty significant performance anxiety, and press outlets would go to these TV appearances she was doing, and specifically that TRL appearance, and they said that she looked very nervous, and they were very critical of her performances on these shows. So Diddy, he does something seemingly in an attempt to build the confidence in his newly signed talent, and he tells MTV News, and I'm quoting him, You could hear the nervousness in her voice, and to be honest, I kind of smiled at it because it really made me appreciate what I really love about her. She's a regular person. It just made me appreciate that she got nervous. And it was kind of cute to me, to be honest. You've got to understand that her success is coming out of nowhere. It's just so huge, and sometimes everybody handles it differently. So that was a quote from Diddy. Now, on its face, this seems like a very nice thing to do. You're taking up for your artist, but I personally think it's a really early example of Diddy's attempt to kind of groom Cassie. Then, in November of 2006, Cassie travels overseas with Diddy to play in a performance in Denmark. While she was getting her hair done to go on stage, her hairstylist mentions to her that Diddy wanted to go out with Cassie. And Cassie at that time kind of dismisses this as gossip. She had no idea at this time that Diddy had anything outside of a professional interest in her. But then Diddy starts really attempting to intertwine his life with her. He invites himself to her 21st birthday party in Las Vegas, and he also brings along some famous musicians and producers, and it became very obvious to her that he was trying to flaunt his celebrity status and his influence in front of her. And although he knew that she was in a relationship at the time, and even though he was publicly in a relationship himself at that time with Kim Porter, Diddy nevertheless pursued her at an after party that same night. And in a hotel suite following her birthday party, Diddy pulls Cassie into the bathroom and he forcibly kisses her. Now, Cassie did not consent. She immediately runs out of the bathroom and the hotel suite. She was really too scared to tell anyone outside of her best friend about this. Y'all, you got to remember, this is a billionaire record producer. You just signed a 10-album contract with him. You're not looking to, insult him or do something to get yourself fired or sued for that matter. Now, the next day they had the MTV Video Music Awards, and Cassie's boyfriend at the time joined her and Diddy at a table at that award ceremony, and Diddy gets pissed. He actually tells Cassie that the invitation to that award ceremony was only for her and not for her boyfriend. So she can see at this time that, whoa, this guy is really trying to control me. Then, after arriving back in New York, Diddy calls Cassie and he asks her for a date. Now, she was hesitant, but like I said, this guy controlled her entire career and she really felt obligated to accept it. So he arrives and she meets him in his car, and she's shocked to find him already drunk. He then pulls out a pill and he asks her to take it. And when she asked what it was, he said, "Don't worry, you'll like it." So feeling pressured, she goes ahead and takes the pill and find out later it was ecstasy. It was the first time she had ever got high with Diddy and the first time she took ecstasy. So they arrive at a club, and it's an upscale club in New York, and Diddy gets in an argument with the security at the club. They can tell he's intoxicated. They don't want to let him in. He's acting a fool, right? They refuse to let him in, as a matter of fact, because of this. Now, he does eventually get inside that club after embarrassing both himself and Cassie, but Cassie is mortified by this point. So she calls her own cab, leaves the club, doesn't tell him any of this, and goes back to her apartment. On the way back to that apartment, as soon as Diddy noticed she wasn't there, he starts just hammering her with texts, berating her for leaving. And then things started getting even stranger in the relationship. Diddy would control pretty much every aspect of her life, even down to her doctor's appointments, y'all. He would actually have her medical records sent to his email address rather than hers. So this continues for quite a while. And then in early fall of 2007, Diddy and Cassie start a more romantic, I don't know if I would term it romantic, but they start a physical relationship. And this is how it started. Diddy calls Cassie and he says, "I want you to go to Miami with me, and we're just going to have a lot of fun. I'm going to pay for everything, right?" And she had a boyfriend at the time, and she's like, "I don't know if my boyfriend's going to like that." So Diddy comes up with an idea, and he actually makes a fake flyer. And this fake flyer says that Cassie has a performance, essentially, that she's doing in Miami. It's like an after party, and it's totally fake. And he says, show this to your boyfriend, and that way he doesn't give you any flack about it. Cassie doesn't know what to do. I mean, this guy is controlling every aspect of her life. So she gives in, she does that. Her boyfriend buys it, and her and Diddy go to Miami. Now, while they're there, drugs are flying everywhere. He is providing her with pretty much an endless amount of drugs. And she had had some drug problems in the past and had kind of kicked those problems, and Diddy was getting her back hooked on those problems. She was also more intoxicated than she had ever been in her entire life. And she was quoted in this lawsuit as saying it was an intoxication that lasted the entire weekend. I was never sober. So he has sex with her several times throughout this weekend trip. And that was the first time they had been sexual together. So we're going to talk about drugs a little bit, and a little later on, we'll get into the control that Diddy had on her when he would get her high. And I think that was his aim. But she often described the ease of getting drugs and the ease that Diddy specifically had for drugs, whether it be painkillers or cocaine or any of those things. She said it was like candy. He just had them all the time. So that was one way in which he controlled her, and he would exude that control often. To give you an example of that, one conversation they had kind of early on in their relationship, he asked her what she called her grandfather. You know, some people call him grandpa or pawpaw or whatever. And Cassie responded that she called her grandfather Pop Pop. Diddy said, from now on, you're going to refer to me as Pop Pop. That's weird, y'all. That's freaking weird. But that was another manner in which he controlled her. And I know throughout this podcast, I've been telling you, that she was very fearful of Diddy, not only of what he could do to her physically, but also what he could do to her career. And the fact that he could sue her on top of all of that. The physical was about to get real with her, though, and we're going to get into that. But there were other examples where she knew Diddy wasn't really scared of anything. And she lists a scenario where her and Diddy were using drugs together one night at his home. And one of his security staff barges in the door, and he announced that Suge Knight, which Suge Knight was the president of Death Row Records, which was Tupac Shakur's label. And they had a big rivalry with Bad Boy Records. So this security officer staff guy barges in the room. He says, hey, we just spotted Suge Knight at Mel's Diner. So Mr. Combs jumps up. He gets dressed. He grabs multiple guns from a safe, and he runs out of the apartment to where he, headed to where they believe Suge Knight was dining. With the intent there, from what she's saying, is they were going to shoot him. On at least two occasions, Diddy demanded that Cassie hold Diddy's gun in her purse, and she wasn't comfortable around guns. So she was very scared. She knew this guy was packing at all times and wouldn't hesitate to use a gun, right? Then there was the physical fear that he exuded over her. And it came in the form of beatings. Y'all ain't going to believe this. Over the next decade, he would just beat her multiple times each year. She lists an instance after a party with Jay-Z where he beat her repeatedly in an Escalade. He kicked her, he hit her, and then he forced her out of the vehicle on 5th Avenue in New York City. Now, she was able to eventually hail a cab and get to her apartment. But again, because of who he was, she couldn't really tell anybody about it. She had to spend 3 days in that apartment, though, y'all, because her bruising was so bad. She knew if she went outside the apartment, someone would know a beating went down with Diddy. Then in January of 2009, Diddy learns that Cassie had spoke to another music manager at a party in Los Angeles. Someone had told him she saw him talking to this guy. They're in the same business, right? So Diddy's pissed. So he goes to the club. Now this all occurs on the same night. He goes to the club where his spy had called Diddy and said she's in here talking to a rival music manager. Sees her in the club, pulls her out, and while she's leaving, he pushes her in the corner of his vehicle and he starts stomping her face. And he had a security guy with him by the name of Roger Bonds, and he's trying to stop the beating, but he's totally unable to escalate that situation. When the car arrives at Diddy's residence, Cassie, she attempts to run away, but Diddy follows her and proceeds again to kick her in the face. She starts bleeding profusely, and so they pick her up off the ground. They usher her into Diddy's apartment, and she is beaten so severely that she starts vomiting. So they clean her up as best they can, and Diddy realizes, oh shit, I have beat the shit out of this girl. And so he panics and he forces his staff to bring her to a hotel suite in Los Angeles. She ends up having to stay there for a full week before the swelling would go down and she could leave the apartment. A lot of reason for this lady to fear Diddy. Now let's get into the real freaky stuff. And even Diddy knew this was freaky because we're going to tell you about the freak-offs, the FO, as he referred to them. You might wonder what a freak-off is. Get ready for this, y'all. Within a few months, just a few months of beginning a physical relationship with Diddy, Cassie would pretty much do whatever he told her to do. He's feeding her drugs, keeping her high all the time, and while in New York City, Diddy tells Cassie he wants to engage in a fantasy. And he says that fantasy for him is voyeurism. And he said, I think it would turn you on if I saw you with another dick. That's a quote. So the first time, Diddy hires a man and he brings the man to his home in Los Angeles. And the man, Diddy and Cassie, they all wear these masquerade masks and they start doing drugs. Then Diddy directs Cassie to perform sex acts with this man while he watches them. And he's masturbating as he's directing, essentially, Cassie and the man to do specific sexual acts. This didn't last for an hour, y'all. This didn't last for 2 hours. This lasted multiple days, doing drugs the whole time. So after that particular encounter, that's when he started referring to the arrangement as freak-offs. That's what he would tell her. When I tell you I want a freak-off or an FO, you know what it means. Now, there were many points during Cassie and Diddy's relationship that he would insist on a freak-off weekly. Diddy would tell Cassie that this practice was our thing and our secret. You're not to tell anybody, but I love these freak-offs, right? And FOs would often take place in nice hotel suites. I mean, you're talking the Trump International Hotel, the Beverly Hills Hotel, just these really beautiful, expensive suites set up all for the freak-offs. So they're doing these freak-offs, and eventually Diddy tells Cassie to use websites and escort services to find male sex workers to participate in the freak-offs. Diddy would tell her, and I'm quoting, to search for large black penises on the websites. Now, sometimes Diddy would even pay to fly male sex workers to his location, wherever he's at. You know, he was always somewhere, multiple cities in the United States or even abroad in other countries. And he would fly these male sex workers in. He would tell Cassie and his staff to help him make those arrangements. And they would make sure in these freak-offs that there was baby oil and Astroglide in the room. And Diddy always supplied Cassie and the sex worker with drugs before and during the freak-offs. Cassie was given ecstasy, cocaine, GHB, ketamine, marijuana, and alcohol in extremely excessive amounts during freak-offs, and that would allow her to disassociate, right? When you're drunk or when you're extremely high, you can disassociate from what's going on in these encounters, and it became commonplace for her to actually have to get IV fluids in the days after a freak-off just to recover from the excessive drugs and alcohol that she was given. Diddy also told Cassie that she had to dress up in lingerie for a freak off, and Diddy insisted she wear white nail polish. And the reason he did that was he wanted her nails to contrast with the skin color of the black men that he hired to have sex with her. And during many freak offs, Diddy would instruct Cassie to pour excessive amounts of oil all over herself. He was like into the oil. He would then instruct Cassie and the sex workers to speak to each other, and then would specifically tell Cassie where to touch the sex workers. He would say things like, and I'm quoting again, grab that big black dick and ask her, how does it feel, quote unquote. As he essentially directed her like she was in a porn movie during these things. Now, during the freak-offs, in addition to directing her and masturbating, he would use his phone, his laptop, and his tablet to film her having sex with these hired sex workers. He would almost treat these encounters, in her words, as a personal art project. He would adjust the lighting in the room even. He would move candles in certain places, literally like he's directing a big-budget film. Now, while Cassie quickly deleted any photographs or video of the sex acts that were taken on her phone, he repeatedly would make it clear to her that he has so many videos of her doing freak-offs, and it was almost used as like a threat. If, I'll release these. Even when she deleted the videos, Diddy would tell Cassie that he was able to recover deleted videos from her devices. So even when she would delete them from her phones, he would tell her, I got a program that can recover all that. Now, on one occasion, he actually sat next to her on a flight and made her watch a video that she thought she had deleted from her phone. And he was doing this, y'all, to reinforce her inability to escape the power he had over her. That was just another way to say, I can ruin your life, right? And you may be wondering, well, what were these sex workers getting paid? These male sex workers, they were getting several $1,000s in cash for their services at each of these freak-offs. Now, during some freak-offs, Diddy would become extremely drunk, and he would actually hit Cassie in front of the male sex workers. Cassie was repulsed by this, in her words, but between him physically beating her and exuding all this power over her, she became so scared of him, she pretty much would do whatever he asked her to do in these freak-offs. And there were even several occasions during these freak-offs where her anxiety would work up. She didn't really want to do this, right? And she would become physically ill and start vomiting. And she even recounted some occasions she's kneeled over a toilet and Diddy would basically shame her into performing for him. And he would constantly remind her that she had a lot to lose and you don't need to go to the police or anybody else and complain about this. Now, around August of 2015, in the middle of a surprise birthday party for Cassie's 29th birthday, Diddy insists that she leave her own birthday party and go to a hotel for a freak-off. Now, she told him, I don't want to do that. I'm at my birthday party. I want to stay here. Diddy then had his security staff basically corner her in the living room of the hotel and force her to leave with him. After that particular freak off, Diddy and Cassie went back to the hotel room that Cassie was staying in, where Cassie's friends were already hanging out. Now, at this point, Diddy's drunker than shit, and at one point he picks up one of Cassie's friends like a child, basically, and dangles the friend over the 17th floor hotel suite balcony. In 2011, as you would expect, there's a rough patch with Diddy and Cassie's relationship, and they kind of break up for a little while. And she has a brief relationship with a musician by the name of Kid Cudi. And although she's in this relationship, she still feels like she's got to do whatever Diddy wants her to do. And he contacts her and he says, I want another freak off. So during that particular freak off, Diddy finds Cassie's phone and he finds some emails between her and Kid Cudi. He becomes so pissed that he puts a manual corkscrew between his fingers and starts swinging at Cassie. Now she's able to run away and get out of the room, and she leaves and she goes and she stays at Kid Cudi's home and hides out there so that Diddy can't get to her. And it wasn't shortly thereafter that one of the staff members calls Cassie and says, Diddy just wants to talk to you. So fearing, for her safety and everything else, she returns to Diddy. What does he do? You guessed it. Beats the shit out of her. And she goes to her parents' home in Connecticut, and her mom actually photographs all these bruises that he left on her body during that particular encounter. But it gets crazier. Listen to this. In February of 2012, this is during Paris's Fashion Week, the biggest fashion week show in the world, right? Diddy tells Cassie that he's going to blow up Kid Cudi's car and that he wanted to ensure that Kid Cudi was home with his friends when it happened. Now, she thinks he's full of shit, but it was around that time, shortly thereafter, Kid Cudi's car explodes in his driveway. So in 2015, Cassie gets a movie role. And Diddy again shows his control over her. She's shooting a movie in South Africa. And Cassie, she kind of begins this flirtatious relationship with an actor on that movie set. They're into each other and they actually spend New Year's Eve together. But Diddy finds out about this. This guy's got watchers everywhere, right? So Diddy calls the actor and he threatens him. And the actor then calls Cassie and he says, you really need to call Diddy. So he is controlling her even in other relationships. Then in March of 2016, she's still under his control. He's still having her do these freak offs, and they have a freak off. And of course, they're all extremely intoxicated, and he punches Cassie in the face, and he actually gave her a black eye. So after he falls asleep, she says, I'm done, for the 10th time, right? And she tries to leave the hotel room. But as she exits, he wakes up and he sees her leaving. So he follows her into the hallway of the hotel and he's still screaming at her. He grabs at her, but he misses her. And she's running. She's running to the elevator. So he grabs glass vases in the hallway of this 5-star hotel, throws them at her, and glass is crashing everywhere as she runs to the elevator to escape. She does manage to escape. She gets to the lobby and she grabs a cab, gets the hell out of there, goes to her apartment. So she's on the way to the apartment. This guy has totally rewired her mind to where she's thinking, oh my God, he's going to be so pissed that I left. And he has manipulated her so bad. She feels like she's got to go back and apologize to him for leaving. So she goes back to the hotel and the security staff stops her in the lobby. And they said, you can't go back up there. And she's like, what are you talking about? And they said, we've seen everything on the surveillance video and you don't need to go back up there. And she didn't. She turned around and went back to her apartment. So Diddy finds out about this and actually pays the hotel $50,000 to get the original raw security footage so that it wouldn't get out, to the press and all that sort of stuff. So, in every relationship that's like this, there's a straw that breaks the camel's back, right? Throughout all of this scenario, there was someone going back, someone leaving, right? They were breaking up frequently, getting back together. Now, by 2018, Cassie had become so desperate to leave Diddy and the abuse that came along with him, right? Her career was suffering because of it. She couldn't focus on her music or her acting. And in September, she joins Diddy at dinner at an Italian restaurant. And both of them at this point had an understanding that this would be a discussion about just ending the relationship for good and parting as friends, let's say. So they have that dinner. And after dinner, Diddy and Cassie go back to Cassie's home. You know, it's like, I'll see you later. He kicks the door in essentially. And he tries to kiss Cassie, and she tells him to stop. She pushes away from him, and then he forcibly rips her clothing off and unbuckles his belt and rapes her, flat out rapes her. She screams no 50 times and tries to push him away, and he forces himself on her, penetrates her, and that was the last straw for her. But there's a positive note to this story, and that is that eventually Cassie turns her life around. She goes to rehab, and after her split with Diddy, Cassie moved on and started another relationship with a guy named Alex Fine, and she actually weds that guy in September of 2019. And they actually have 2 daughters now, Frankie and Sunny. She released a statement after this lawsuit. And in her statement, she said, "I am finally ready to tell my story and speak up on behalf of myself and for the benefit of other women who face violence and abuse in their relationship." So that was her reasoning for filing this. And of course, Diddy, through his representatives, had a statement back. And that statement was, I'll read it verbatim. "Mr. Combs vehemently denies these offensive and outrageous allegations. For the past 6 months, he has been subjected to Miss Ventura's persistent demand of $30 million under the threat of writing a damaging book about their relationship, which was unequivocally rejected as blatant blackmail." So that was his statement back. So you may wonder, what happened in this lawsuit? Well, get ready for this. 24 hours after this lawsuit was filed, it was settled for an undisclosed amount. But I have no hesitation telling you it was likely many, many millions. So if you're going to settle a lawsuit for many, many millions of dollars when these accusations are made about you in 24 hours time, you draw your own conclusion on whether you think that person did it and was just trying to make it go away. But like I told you, it kept on coming for Diddy. And 2 other lawsuits were filed just a few days later. One of them is someone that is referred to in the document as Miss Doe. And the reason is when this all took place, this person was a minor, this female. And so her identity is protected. She's not a minor anymore, but was a minor when this took place. You're not going to believe this quick story. So in this lawsuit, she does reference at the beginning that what gave her the strength to actually file this lawsuit was Cassie's lawsuit. It made her not fear as much the repercussions of filing it. So in 2003, Miss Doe was a 17-year-old 11th grader residing in Detroit, Michigan. Now at the time, Diddy was 34, twice the age of Miss Doe. She's an 11th grader, y'all. Even if he was 20, it wouldn't matter. But at the time, Diddy had a lot of connections in Michigan, and including what's known as BMF, which is the Black Mafia family, which was a drug trafficking and money laundering organization that is rumored to have seeded Bad Boy Records in the beginning and given them the money to start that business. So on one evening between the spring and fall of 2003, Miss Doe was out with friends, and it wasn't uncommon for her and her friends to frequent bars and lounges in the Detroit area. So look, I can't imagine why you'd be in 11th grade and frequenting bars and things like that. There's a lot of trouble out there, but she did. It wasn't uncommon for her and her friends. So whatever, no judgment. On the evening in question, Miss Doe was with friends in a lounge when she was approached by a guy by the name of Mr. Pierre. Okay. Mr. Pierre was with what we're going to refer to as a third assailant. Mr. Pierre, he starts complimenting Miss Doe's appearance at this club. He says that she was hot, and he begins talking to her about his, as he described it, best friend and brother, Diddy. Now, specifically, Mr. Pierre continually stated that Diddy would love to meet Miss Doe. So she's sitting there and she's thinking, oh, this dude don't really know Diddy, right? Well, he calls Diddy and he puts Miss Doe on the phone. And Diddy tells Miss Doe that he would love to meet her and that she should accompany Mr. Pierre to New York City in a private jet. So they get off the phone and Mr. Pierre's trying to work his magic with her, right? 17-year-old, real classy guy, Mr. Pierre. So he directs Miss Doe to go with him to the bathroom of the lounge. Once inside the bathroom, he starts smoking crack cocaine in what she thought to be was an aluminum can. Now, after he finishes smoking crack, he suddenly takes out his penis and he demands that Miss Doe suck his dick, quote unquote. So he forces her head down to perform oral sex on him. Sexual assault. Open and shut, right? So then he directs her to accompany him and a third assailant and a third member of their group to an airport in Michigan, where he had a private jet waiting for the four of them to fly to New York City to go see Diddy. She goes, she's scared to death. They fly to New York City in this private jet, and upon landing in New York City, two black SUVs show up and they get in these SUVs, and the SUVs bring them to what's known as Daddy's House Recording Studio. It's a recording studio and a hangout that is owned and operated by Diddy and Bad Boy. So upon entering that studio, she encounters Diddy. And while still at the studio section of Daddy's house, which is Diddy's recording studio, Diddy asks her to sit on his lap to take a picture. Well, if you've been doubting her story so far, there is a picture of her. Face is blurred out, but you can see everything else. She's got a short denim skirt, it looks like, and is hiked all the way up. And she's got on like a tank top, and her ass is right in Diddy's crotch. So Diddy, Mr. Pierre, and a third assailant, they begin to start giving Miss Doe drugs and alcohol. There it is, y'all. There is his MO, right? That's how he gets control over you. He gets you so high and drunk you don't know what you're doing. Well, Miss Doe remembers only parts of what happened after that. But she does recall Mr. Combs, Mr. Pierre, and the third assailant hitting on her incessantly, stroking her body, asking to see her ass, and telling her how fine she was. And she has several photos from that night in that studio. And as the night wore on, the 17-year-old became more and more inebriated, eventually to the point where she could have not even consented to having sex, much less with someone twice her age. So when you're drunk, you cannot consent to sex, even if you consent to sex. Even if you say, yes, I want to have sex with you. If you are drunk, if you are not in your sound mind, it is illegal here in the state of Louisiana, where we record out of. That is third-degree rape. There's a case going on right now about that, actually. So Diddy directs Miss Doe to accompany him to the bathroom of the studio. And once there, Diddy removes Miss Doe's skirt and underwear and penetrates her from behind with his penis while she hung over the sink. At no point, in her words, did she consent. But she couldn't have anyway, right? Now, at some point, Diddy turns Miss Doe around to face him, and he tells her that he could not orgasm and asks her to squeeze his nipples as hard as she can to help him get off. He then turns her back around and continues to rape her. By that point, Miss Doe she's kind of coming in and out of consciousness. She's high, she's drunk. So her next memory was looking into the mirror above the sink to find that the third assailant had replaced Diddy and was raping her from behind. Diddy was watching the third assailant sexually assault her from a chair outside the bathroom. Now, at this point, she did muster the energy to tell the third assailant to stop. But he didn't stop, and he continued to rape her. So after the third assailant was finished, he got replaced by Mr. Pierre, and he begins having sex with Miss Doe before violently forcing her to give him oral sex. And during the latter part of that sexual assault, Mr. Pierre forced his penis into Miss Doe's mouth without her consent, and you can guess what happened after that. So they gang raped this girl. And when they're done, they take her back to the airport and they fly her back to Michigan. And there's another lawsuit that we're going to cover in depth that was just filed 2 weeks ago from this recording, and you're not going to believe. If you think what you have heard so far is bad, just wait till our next episode. So I want to thank everyone for listening to this episode of Exposed Scandalous Files of the Elite. Sean P. Diddy Combs. Much love.